of this committee to ask questions of a former Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. It's great to see you again, and my friend, you're recognized.
Unprecedented. Well, thank you, Senator Carper. This does feel like old times. Back in 2014, a little deja vu. You've got the gavel, I'm sitting next to you, and we're in the midst of a crisis at the border, even though some are denying it. I know during my chairmanship, in hearings, we're always going through the problem-solving process. I'd often say the first step in solving any problem is admitting you have one. And it just does seem like we're in an utter state of denial. I've got a chart a little bit different than Senator Portman's. His is children. I've got total apprehensions of the border. And it shows clearly, it's galling, quite honestly, to hear that this is a crisis inherited by this administration, that the chairman is saying that the numbers are decreasing, the situation's improving. The surge started in April of 2020. To the extent that we had any surge in 2020, it's because Democrat presidential candidates were saying, we're not going to deport anybody and we're going to give everybody free health care. That was an incentive. That was a pull factor. But it's very clear what's been happening. The crisis in 2018, 2019, we had probably a little over 4,000 apprehensions per day. We have, for the last 4 or 5 weeks, been close to 6,000 per day. In 2014, we were dealing with around 2,000 per day. This is unprecedented what's happening here. And when you talk about the Trump administration dismantling things, what they did is they ended catch and release. They ended the enormous incentive for people to come into this country and exploit our very generous asylum laws. Mr. Secretary, real quick, isn't it true that when cases are actually adjudicated on asylum, about 90% of them are denied?
I don't believe that is true. And
what is the real percentage then?
Senator, I don't have the data right before me, but I'm very happy.
Okay, please get that for me. But let me ask you: Have you done a cost study on how much money the taxpayers will waste that is going to be expended by not honoring the contracts to build the final 250 miles of wall? Have you figured out how much that's going to cost the American taxpayer and get no wall built?
Senator, I certainly have taken a look at the expenses that were incurred in building the wall, and in my opinion, how much waste was caused by that construction when, in fact, we could have leveraged innovation of new technologies that prove far more effective in securing the border.
Okay, so again, I know you're in a state of denial, but let's go back to my chart here. What the Trump administration did is they ended the incentives. So they put in place the migrant protection protocols. Then they, quite honestly, threatened some tariffs to get cooperation from Mexico. That's that line right there, and you can see it worked. Add to that the imposition of Title 42, and it really worked. We pretty well stopped a robust surge of illegal immigration at the border, and that was pretty much in effect. Again, it started ramping up when Democratic presidential candidates started talking about open borders and free health care. This is President Biden's inauguration. Here's the surge. I mean, that's the surge. Let me talk about real numbers, too. At the height of the surge in May of 2018, it was about a little over 7,000 unaccompanied children per month. In March of 2020, right here, that had dropped to about 3,000. After Title 42, it dropped down to 741 per month. That was the low point. In March of this year, almost 19,000. Last month in April, 17,000 unaccompanied children. Those are the numbers. We can talk about percentages and tripling the numbers since April, but here's the problem. There's the surge, and it is undeniable, and yet you are denying it. And this is as close to open borders as we could possibly have. Don't you think that's going to be even more of a pull factor?
Senator, may I?
Quick.
May I have a minute to answer your question?
Again, is that going to be a pull factor or not?
Senator,
That's kind of a yes or no answer.
you've asked a few
No,
questions.
I haven't really asked the questions. Let me ask you some questions. I want to go back to, I want to talk about the February 18th interim guidance to all ICE employees in terms of carrying out enforcement removal priorities. First of all, was there any analysis regarding how the new priorities would impact crime and public safety before that guidance was issued?
Yes.
Can you provide us those documents, that analysis?
Senator, I have worked for 12 years as a federal prosecutor. I have been in the immigration.
Sure, no, would you
enforcement
provide us
areas.
those documents? Will you provide me those documents, that analysis?
Senator,
Yes or no?
yes, I will.
Okay, thank you. Was there any consultation or coordination with states regarding how the new guidelines would impact law enforcement and public safety?
Senator, one of the things that I've articulated in the promulgation of the guidelines that I will execute is that I will engage with the workforce of Immigration and Customs
No,
Enforcement.
the question is, did you engage and coordinate with state governments prior to that guidance being issued? Yes or no?
Senator, I do not know what engagement preceded me. I took office on February.
Okay, can you check?
2000.
Can you check? And if there was, can you provide me that documentation? And finally, talking about states.
Senator.
Again, we're running out of time. I don't want long answers. As local law enforcement is apprehending and holding illegal immigrants that they have flagged for removal, okay, so we've got that group of people. Is ICE issuing detainers on every one of those individuals that local law enforcement is holding and that are flagging for removal?
I'm sure they're not, and nor should they be.
What can you tell me what percentage they would be issuing detainers on?
I don't have that percentage, and I will get that to you as well. But
Okay, good, thank you. My final question then is, because I was shocked when we were at the border. I've heard the word, we become more efficient. Yeah, you become more efficient at apprehending, processing, and dispersing. So I was shocked when we went down the border and said that the guidelines for CBP is to literally process people in 8 hours and disperse them. You get them out of CBP custody and send them all over the country. I was also shocked to find out that we aren't issuing notices to appear. What percentage of people are we dispersing around this country that don't even have a notice to appear?
Senator, the individuals who arrive at our border and are placed in the interior are subject to immigration proceedings, and they receive a notice to appear.
So 100% are receiving a notice to appear. That's your testimony?
The policy of our administration is that each individual is placed into immigration proceedings and receives a notice.
So you're not aware that CBP has been directed not to provide notice to appear as they're dispersing people in the interior? That's your testimony?
That is my testimony, because the process is that U.S. Customs and Border Protection issues a notice to appear, and if in fact they are operationally not able to do so, the individual receives a notice to appear at an Immigration and Customs Enforcement office. Individuals in the interior are placed in immigration proceedings in accordance with enforcement law, period.
I'll be following up with that with other information we've gotten. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I make a couple points that I didn't have the opportunity to make because I didn't have an opportunity?
Yes, no, it's important to have these questions answered, so you may
Answer the
continue,
question.
Secretary.
One of the things the Trump administration did was separate children from their parents. And they ripped sons and daughters out of the hands of fathers and mothers and said they would never see each other again. That's one of the things. And maybe that worked, and maybe it didn't. But I'll tell you what it didn't work for is the values and principles of this country. Number one. Number two,
The Secretary, you may answer the question as you see fit. Let's have an open forum to discuss the issues before us. You may continue, Mr. Secretary.
number two,
Well, you do have questions, but your questions take up the full 7 minutes. We'd certainly like to have the Secretary have an opportunity to answer these questions, Senator. You may continue, Secretary.
the only additional thing I will say is that our enforcement